Covered with scorpions.
No! Covered with scorpions! Get them off me! What are you doing to my head?
What's good, friendly ghosts? We have a high octane week of a really beloved franchise, The Last of Us 2. The game has been up in a lot of controversy. A lot of people, they're not really happy with the product, and this is a really complicated situation. And I'm gonna try not to spoil anything. I don't really want to get into specific spoilers, and the main thing I want to focus on is the storytelling and the storyboard. Just dissect that a bit, because there's a couple of specific scenes, but only one that I really have a decent grasp of right now. Because I'm watching people stream the game. I don't have the game. I don't have any intentions of getting the game myself. It's just not my type of game. But I've kind of dissected this one scene in particular and most of the beginning of the game. And there's a disconnect between the player and the story that they want you to feel involved in. By comparison of The Last of Us 1, one of the biggest differences between those games is that The Last of Us 1 really drives you in on the immersion right off the bat. They do a lot of the little things of trying to make you feel like you're inside the scene as it is happening. They put you into, and this is a trick that a lot of writers use, is they try to make you feel vulnerable, and the quickest way to do that is to put you in the mind and the body of someone who's helpless, like a child or a little girl, somebody who is seen as physically incapable of protecting themselves against danger. The Last of Us 1 does. It puts you inside a toddler little girl, and they put you in this dangerous situation of a survival horror, and you're trying to desperately escape from an oncoming apocalypse. This immediately captures the player, because the player doesn't want to see anything ill happen to the young MC. They don't want to see anything gruesome or horrible to happen to that character. You have a personal investment to not let that young protagonist go under. And that's a personal investment between the player and a quick instant connection that the player has. Then to go along with it, you have father figure, and you have this uncle, and you have these people who want your character to survive more than anything else. It's a realistic expectation and a realistic sympathizer that we can all relate to. You have a pet, you want the pet to be protected. It's a connection with the audience that everybody can grasp. Then they do these scenes where you're in like a first person-esque driving scene sequence, like you're on a Disney ride and you're going through the city. You're seeing everything develop right before your eyes. There's no flashbacks, there's no matching in between different perspectives, which we're going to get into in a little bit. It's all one shot, one perspective, one timeline, and you're seeing everything develop in real time. So you have all these things happening and all these interesting concepts. You're inside a starting apocalypse, not an apocalypse that's already been ongoing. You're seeing an apocalypse develop right before your eyes. You're seeing the desperation that people go through, and the sacrifices people will make, and how cold-blooded they will have to be to survive. You're thinking to yourself like that the whole time as you're playing, would I make these decisions in this situation? Another way that I've related to it personally, because this happens a lot in my house, we often go through these emergency drills where we're like, okay, if there were to be a fire, what's the first thing you would grab, and how would you go about escaping? This plays into this same scenario. It's relatable to us. We know how to deal with it. What's the first thing we're going to grab? What are we going to do to ensure our survival? Are we going to talk to strangers? No. Or are we going to, it's a teacher moment and a parent to child moment. We have all these things going in an interesting concept, in an interesting setting, and a relatable setting. All of these things going just in a couple of minutes of The Last of Us 1. Now let's move that over to The Last of Us 2, which is what a lot of people have issues with. My personal issue is I don't have the game. I'm watching people play the game. I never had any intentions of getting the game. Maybe I will, but not for now, no. So The Last of Us 2 is a very different, it's a big contrast between the first game. First of all, we're not seeing an apocalypse bloom right before our eyes. The apocalypse is already there and is kind of in this weird settling, middling phase. It's kind of like when you're in a story, deep in a story, you make it past the first climax and you're wandering somewhere in the middle and it starts to drag and you're like, when's the next big thing going to happen? When's the next boom? Last of Us 2 kind of starts its game in this middle phase where it's like, okay, this introduction is kind of, it's flatlining. It's flatlining. It's not going up, and it's not starting. It's starting at a very low angle, and it's just flatlining itself out. So that's one strike against it. The other strike against it is it's just not interesting. Not all stories start off with a bang. Not all stories need to start off with like a large action sequence or things hit the ceiling fan right from the jump. Stories have different ways of developing, but in this particular story, it just takes so long, along with the fact that nothing interesting is happening along the way. So you have this large section of a safety net. You're just walking around, just talking to people who you don't know, you don't have a connection with, and what they're trying to do is establish a connection with the player and the new characters that they're trying to introduce. But the characters that they're trying to introduce don't have a lasting appeal on the player. Now, maybe you could be different and you might like these characters. I doubt that severely, but maybe you do have some sort of connection with them. Again, I doubt that severely. They fail at the front of what they were banging their buck on, was making these characters appealing, and they're banging their buck that these characters will drive the narrative until they reach that point where they can begin their journey to the climax. And that doesn't happen. You meet the girl, I don't know her name, but she knows where she's going. So you meet her and you're expected to have this angle which is very affectionate, and for me personally, that also falls at a weird angle. I wouldn't say it falls flat, but I will say that it doesn't hit the home run. It's like a 7 out of 10. I'll say it was more like a 6.5 out of 10 even. I'll take it down a notch. It's about a 6.5 out of 10. It's not bad, just not great. Just somewhere in between the, okay, whatever, we're doing this thing. Okay, I got it. I understand what we're doing, but I don't really feel it. And we go from that, and we're not with the characters that we were introduced in the first game. The characters that we grown fond of in the first game are the characters who are taking a back seat to the side characters who are failing at their introduction. We go to the other character. Here's where the problem that I have with it personally, not just this one sequence, but as an overall whole, as what the storyboard seems to be for The Last of Us 2, is they sift you to an entirely different perspective, to an entirely different character in a different area. And here's my gripe against that. Usually when you're trying to tell a story with different perspectives, and I've been studying this relatively enough, I've been dabbling around with different perspectives quite a bit over the last couple of years, maybe a decade or so, but I'm no expert. But I'm just speaking from what I know and what I've experienced with. When you're trying to tell a story with different perspectives, you're usually trying to have that story with these two different characters in these two different areas usually have one thing in common. They have one thing that they're having a different perspective on. You have a different perspective. If you're telling a story with two characters and multiple perspective story, and they have nothing in common, then you're telling two different stories. You're just telling two short stories. They don't belong together. They don't mix. There's no proper flow in between the scenes. So you have these two characters who don't really interact, who don't have anything in common, who don't know anything about anything relating to each other whatsoever. And it's just like, why? You could have just told the entire story from the main character's perspective and have them go through the normal ways, and that way we can at least get more information about the people in the MC's lives, you know, their side characters, their loved ones, their people that they don't like, you know, the world that they're interacting with. We get to know more about them. But here's what The Last of Us does, and here's how I personally perceive it. They introduce this new character, main character 2, I guess. And this is where a lot of people, a lot of fans are very angry. This character comes in, she's a brand new speaking character, and you play as her. And she has no backstory. And you go through a certain amount of events that are very critical to the story. They reach a climax. And when this climax happens, you still have no history of this new character that they introduce. And so when the climax happens, it feels cheap because you know nothing about this character's view, this character's field of view. You don't know anything about it. And when you have a story about two different perspectives, you want to make those perspectives known as soon as possible, because if not, you're just telling a story with multiple bland characters that could be replaced with anybody. You have to make the perspectives known. And where I feel they dropped the ball is they could have easily have given us an angle with this new character that they introduced. They could have easily given us an angle. Each moment in the story, each story beat should be something significant in telling us what we need to know. Knowing this new character who is just thrown into the fistbowl we know nothing about for hours and hours of gameplay, that's just not going to sit right with people. And so when they end up having a significant role, it falls flat. It could easily have been avoided. You could have just told the entire story from Ellie's perspective. You know, you could have thrown in subtle hints. You know, maybe Ellie sees people, you know, spying on them or something, or maybe you get word of mouth from traders stopping by. They tell you, you know, are you expecting, you know, people coming your way or something like that? Or we've seen people like on the cliffs, we've seen people down the way. There are multiple ways that you could try to fit it in, you know, to make the story flow more seamlessly. But what we end up getting was just abrupt tone shifts, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and then we get flashbacks. I think flashbacks are the worst way to tell a story. You should only tell a flashback if you absolutely have to tell a flashback. And one way to avoid telling a flashback is to begin a chapter without it seeming like it is a flashback. Like you could begin the game this way. It doesn't seem like a flashback because you're introducing something new and a new concept. You introduce the new concept of this new character. You show like a short glimpse of an experience that they went through. You know, you keep it subtle, keep it discreet, but at least you give us something, and then you go on from there. You know, you don't have to take this character and in the present day, they do something drastic. We know nothing about them. And they just make this gigantic tonal shift and change in the game, in the history of the game world. And there's not one drop, not one incentive, not one decibel of love and attachment between that character and the player, and let alone that character and the story. There's nothing connecting this character to this world, and you give them such an important role. That's dropping the ball in my opinion. So that's my big gripe, is you have multiple perspectives. I don't feel like the perspectives are handled. I don't feel like they're handled properly. Because if they were, then we would have known the angles of each characters before anything had reached any climax. You typically want to have that, you know, at least hinted at before a climax happens. We got a very, 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 I wouldn't say subtle, I'd say vague. Vague is different from subtle. Subtle is foreshadowing. Vague is just using words like it, him, her, That, that's vague. Vague doesn't tell you anything. Vague is lazy. Subtle is being cheeky. It's being crafty. It's forcing people to use their minds and to try to fill in the blanks. It, her, him, that, what. You're using these aren't words that are encouraging any sort of creativity. And yeah, that's how I feel about the tonal shifts between different perspectives. Damn, I'm stuttering every time I try to say the word. That's how I feel with multiple perspectives in the way that they handled them. I don't agree, and I believe that it could have been entirely a different story had they handled that properly, or at least a different way. And yeah, I don't want to get into much spoilers. I haven't finished the game, finished watching the game. I'm gonna have to wait on that. I'm watching specific people play the game, and I'm enjoying my time. It's real fun, But there's just some things that are hampering the game down. It's just okay. I gotta list one more thing. I said that the game is kind of bored. It's flatlining in its introduction. The direction of the storytelling is bizarre. Not bizarre in a good way. Not bizarre in a creative way. In a thought-provoking way. But bizarre in a way that is vague. A vague, bizarre way of storytelling. A very bloated way, should I say, because everything that you see happen on screen isn't important, but you want to have each action be of some importance that happens later on, some sort of consequence that happens later on. We want each action to be something important. You want to reward the viewer, the audience, for paying attention. But with Last of Us 2, that's kind of thrown out the window. The immersion is thrown out the window. The adoring characters is tossed out the window. The familiarity with former characters is tossed out the window. So we come into this world as a stranger, expecting to be familiar with it. But we also don't get the chance to get familiar with the new changes. And it just sort of just goes along with that. And it just drags on with this bloated story that doesn't know what's important to tell the audience, but it tells you so much that you don't need to know. And there's also a lot of awkward pauses in the game. Like in the first game, they nailed it out the way. They nailed the presentation out the window, building tensions with the moments, and they really build up each moment with each conversation, and it hits the right spots. If there's a long pause, you feel like that pause is deserved, and you don't feel like it drags on too long. It doesn't get awkward, and if it does get awkward, it's perfectly awkward. But in Last of Us 2, it feels like there are so many long pauses that happens that aren't warranted. They last for way too long. And it's just like, okay, well, hurry up and say what you gotta say, man. Cinematography, something is just off. The pacing is off. Pacing really changes a lot. If you have great pacing, or rather, if you don't have great pacing, you could have the greatest script of all time, and if you have poor pacing, that entire script is going out the window. Just going completely out the window, taking a stage dive. You have to have good pacing, especially for high-profile moments. If you miss the pacing on these high-profile moments, that is heartache, because I know they had to have put a lot of passion, time. I don't know if they put a lot of time into it, but probably put a lot of passion into it. And the pacing is just so off. The tone is just so off. The perspective approach is so off. And the immersion as a result is not there. So that's my take on The Last of Us 2 so far. Yeah, I'm not done with the game, but as we keep going along, maybe I'll talk about it some more. A lot of people are really disliking it. It's crazy. I didn't expect so many people to just be down on a game like this. I thought there would be like an equal fighting force, you know, to rise up against the bashing. But it seems like it's just everybody is just on one side. You know, it's like everybody is just, even the people who love the game, this franchise, like it feels like even them are just like, nah, I can't do this. I'm not the biggest Last of Us fan. I know a decent amount of Last of Us 1, a lot of it. I could probably recite every line in the game, but I wouldn't consider myself to be a big fan. You know, I just, you know, I kept it in the background, you know, with some earphones in a lot of the times while I multitask. You know, it was cool. I liked the story. I was looking forward to Last of Us 2, and I still am. I'm not casting judgment down on the game. I said what I said. I think it's boring so far. I think it's very, very, very boring, and I think it's very, very much up its own derriere. I think the gameplay has not improved much at all. The gameplay, which already wasn't up to par with other games of the same similar genre. I think Last of Us relied heavily on its story, and that has taken a big nerf in season 2. And with them not changing much of anything else, I think people are just seeing what people who preferred gameplay, I think their eyes are just being opened up to what a lot of people saw in Last of Us 1 who didn't care about the story. Other than that, I guess I'll end it with that. This is one big Last of Us video. I didn't want to make this all Last of Us, but I'm still keeping my hopes up. You know, I've seen some of the spoilers. I haven't seen any videos of the spoilers, so this is fun. It's kind of actually like refreshing how everybody's bonding over this game, bonding over the dislike of the treatment that this game, you know, has done, and the mistreatment of service that this game has done. It's weird. Like, I don't consider myself a Last of Us fan, but I feel like I'm bonded, like I'm a brother. I am one. I am one of them. We are one. We will unite. You know, it feels good, you know, and I like some of the things, and I dislike a lot of the other things, especially with the storyboard. And hey, well, I won't cast judgment yet. I'll keep on, and maybe I'll update this sooner or later, maybe not. But hey, hope everyone's having a good day. And with that, I bid you further ado. May peace be with. Always keep your heads up. Deuces, dos, both adios, stay cool. And if you like my content, be sure to show some love. But always be sure to show some love to the people that matter to you. This is ITOwl, and be cool. Don't go golfing. Especially in quarantine. Peace.